Commander Jake Morrison stood in the briefing room, staring at the holographic message that had just arrived from deep space. The blue light from the projection made his face look tired, though he was only 35 years old. Behind him, 3 other officers waited in silence, knowing that whatever this message contained, it would change everything for humanity. "Play it again," Jake said quietly. The message repeated. A tall alien figure appeared in the hologram, its skin covered in scales that shimmered like oil on water. The creature had 4 arms and eyes that glowed with an inner light. When it spoke, the translation software turned its words into perfect English. "Greetings to the people of Earth. I am Ambassador Kelthar of the Galactic Council. Your species has been observed for the past 50 years since you achieved faster-than-light travel. The Council has decided to offer humanity provisional membership in the galactic community. However, as with all new species, you must prove your worth in the combat trials. You have 30 days to select your champion and arrive at Keras Prime. The trials begin whether you attend or not. Choose wisely." The message ended, leaving the room in darkness except for the emergency lighting along the floor. General Patricia Hayes, the head of Earth Defense Force, broke the silence first. "What do we know about these combat trials?" she asked. Lieutenant Danny Cooper stepped forward with a datapad. He was young, barely 23, but he was the best researcher in the intelligence division. "Not much, ma'am. We've intercepted some alien broadcasts over the years, but most of it was encrypted. What we do know is that the trials happen once every 100 years. Each species sends 1 warrior. They fight one-on-one in some kind of arena. The winner brings honor to their species and gets more influence in the council." "And if we don't send anyone?" Jake asked. "Then we're seen as weak," Danny said. "Or worse, cowards. Based on what we've learned about galactic politics, that would put us at the bottom of the hierarchy. We'd get no respect, no trade agreements, no protection if another species decided to invade Earth." General Hayes turned to Jake. "The Council didn't specifically request you, but every simulation we've run says you're our best option. You've fought in more combat situations than anyone else in the Defense Force. You've won medals in every major military competition we have. You're tactical, you're smart, and you don't panic under pressure." Jake looked at his hands. They were calloused from years of training. He had grown up in Detroit, back before the Unification Wars, when Earth was still divided into hundreds of nations that fought each other over resources and ideology. He'd seen combat on 4 continents, fought in deserts and jungles and frozen wastelands. He'd trained in a dozen different martial arts because weapons could fail, could be taken away, could run out of ammunition. His body was his primary weapon, and it had never let him down. "What about weapons?" Jake asked. "What are the rules?" Danny pulled up another file. "That's the interesting part. According to what we've decoded, warriors enter the arena unarmed. The arena itself provides weapons based on something called neural patterns. It reads your mind, your combat instincts, and gives you weapons you're trained to use." "So a sniper would get a rifle," Jake said, understanding. "A swordsman would get a blade." "Exactly," Danny confirmed. "The arena is supposed to be fair. Everyone gets weapons that match their training and natural abilities." General Hayes walked closer to Jake. "I won't order you to do this. This has to be your choice, but I'll be honest with you, Commander. If you don't go, I don't know who we'd send instead. You're the best we have." Jake thought about his daughter, Sophie, who was 7 years old and living with her mother in Colorado. He thought about the billions of people on Earth who had no idea their entire future might depend on one person winning fights against aliens they'd never seen. He thought about what it would mean to lose, to come home in disgrace, to have humanity labeled as weak by species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. "I'll go," he said simply. The next 30 days passed in a blur. Jake trained harder than he ever had in his life. He studied every piece of information Earth had about alien species. He watched recordings of alien biology, trying to understand how different body types might fight. He meditated to prepare his mind for what was coming. And he made a decision that he told no one about, not even General Hayes. When the transport ship arrived to take him to Keras Prime, Jake walked aboard with just a small bag of personal items. The ship was provided by the Galactic Council, and it was the most advanced piece of technology he'd ever seen. The walls seemed to be alive, shifting and changing color. The crew were aliens from a species called the Tethrans, who looked like tall humans but with skin that was bright purple. The journey took 7 days, even at faster than light speeds. During that time, Jake met other warriors who were also traveling to the trials. There was a massive creature called a Kragor, at least 9 feet tall, covered in thick armor-like skin. Its name was Thulkar, and it was the current champion. It had won the last 3 trials, which meant it had been fighting for 300 years. The Kragor lived much longer than humans. Thulkar looked at Jake during a meal in the ship's common area. "You are the human?" it asked in a voice like grinding stones. "I am," Jake replied calmly. "You are small, weak. Your species is new to the galaxy. Why did they send you?" "I guess they think I have a chance," Jake said. The other aliens in the common area laughed. Thulkar smiled, showing teeth like knives. "I respect courage, even foolish courage. But you will not survive the first round, human. The trials are not kind to soft species." Jake didn't argue. He just nodded and continued eating his meal. Let them think he was weak. Let them underestimate him. He had learned a long time ago that surprise was often more valuable than strength. When the ship finally reached Karis Prime, Jake looked out the window and saw a planet that was completely covered in cities. Billions of aliens lived here, and they had all come to watch the trials. The arena was visible even from space, a massive structure that glowed with energy at the planet's equator. As the ship descended, Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Somewhere down there in that arena, he would either prove that humanity belonged among the stars, or he would fail and doom his species to centuries of being ignored and disrespected. Either way, he was ready to fight. The arena was larger than any stadium Jake had ever seen on Earth. It could hold millions of spectators, and every seat was filled with aliens from across the galaxy. The noise was overwhelming, a mixture of sounds that human ears weren't designed to process. Some species clicked, others hummed, and some made sounds that hurt to hear. Jake stood in the preparation chamber with 66 other warriors. Each one represented their species, and each one looked ready to kill. He was easily the smallest warrior in the room, except for a slug-like creature that oozed rather than walked. But even that creature had poisonous spines sticking out of its body. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the bracket for the trials. Jake's first opponent would be a Thorian named Vexilon. The display showed an image of the alien, and Jake studied it carefully. Vexilon was at least 7 feet tall and covered in bony armor plates that looked like they had grown naturally from his skin. His face was angular and harsh, with eyes that glowed red. "Warriors!" a voice boomed through the chamber. "The trials will begin shortly. As you know, you will enter the arena unarmed. The arena's neural interface will scan your combat patterns and provide appropriate weapons. May the strongest survive." Jake watched as the first fight began on the large screens mounted on the walls. A reptilian warrior called a Salth entered the arena from one side. The moment he stepped onto the glowing floor, light swirled around him and twin plasma blades materialized in his hands. They burned with blue fire, hot enough to cut through steel. His opponent was an insect-like Vex, and when it entered, the arena gave it a rifle that shot crystals filled with poison. The fight was brutal and fast. The Salth warrior moved with incredible speed, dodging the poison shots and closing the distance. Within 5 minutes, the Vex was dead, its body dissolving into the arena floor as the crowd cheered. More fights followed, and Jake watched each one carefully. He was learning how the arena worked, how different species fought, and most importantly, how the weapon system responded to each warrior. Every fighter seemed to know exactly what weapon they wanted, and the arena gave it to them immediately. Then it was his turn. "Commander Jake Morrison of Earth, enter the arena," the voice announced. Jake walked through the tunnel that led to the fighting floor. His heart was beating steadily, calmly. He had fought in worse situations than this. At least here there were rules. The tunnel opened up, and suddenly he was standing in the center of the arena with millions of eyes watching him. The floor beneath his feet was made of some kind of energy that felt solid, but glowed with a soft white light. The ceiling was so far above that he could barely see it. The walls were transparent, showing the massive crowd beyond. Jake stood still and waited. The neural interface activated, and he felt a strange tingling sensation in his head, like someone was reading his thoughts. The arena was scanning him, looking for his combat training, his preferred weapons, his instincts. Nothing happened. The crowd started murmuring. Jake could hear confusion in their alien voices. The scanning lights circled him again, brighter this time, more insistent. Still nothing materialized. The arena's computer voice spoke. "Error detected. Rescanning warrior designated Jake Morrison." The light swirled around him a third time. Jake just stood there calmly, his hands at his sides, waiting. He knew exactly what was happening, and it was exactly what he wanted. Neural pattern unclear. No weapon preference detected, the computer announced. The crowd erupted in laughter. In the observation boxes high above, Jake could see Thulkar and the other champions pointing at him. The Kragor delegation was roaring with amusement, their massive bodies shaking. On the screens visible throughout the arena, alien commentators were speaking rapidly in their various languages, probably all saying the same thing. The human was so primitive that the arena couldn't even give him a weapon. Some aliens in the crowd shouted that the fight should be stopped. It would be unfair, they said, maybe even cruel to make him fight without weapons. A few called for humanity to be disqualified from the trials entirely. But Jake just rolled his shoulders and raised his fists in a basic fighting stance. His feet were shoulder-width apart, his weight balanced, his hands protecting his face. It was a stance that human fighters had used for thousands of years. "Warrior Vexilon of Thoria, enter the arena," the voice commanded. The Thorian walked out from the opposite tunnel, and the moment he entered, a massive warhammer materialized in his hands. It was made of pure energy, glowing orange and red like molten metal. Vexilon lifted it easily, even though the weapon was bigger than Jake's entire torso. Vexilon looked at Jake and laughed. "This is the champion Earth sends? A warrior with no weapons and no armor? Your species deserves to be at the bottom of the galaxy." "Maybe," Jake said calmly. "Let's find out." The starting signal sounded, a deep tone that vibrated through the arena floor. Vexilon charged forward, raising his warhammer high. He was fast for his size, closing the distance in seconds. The crowd watched, expecting the fight to be over in one hit. The hammer came down with enough force to crack stone. Jake wasn't there. He had moved at the last possible moment, sliding to the side and forward inside Vexilon's reach. The hammer hit the arena floor where Jake had been standing, sending energy sparks flying. But Jake was already moving again. He struck Vexilon's arm, right where the armor plates met at the elbow joint. It was a precise hit using the hard ridge of his palm. Vexilon grunted in pain and surprise. Before the Thorian could react, Jake hit him again, this time in the knee joint. Then he grabbed Vexilon's arm and used the alien's own momentum to throw him off balance. Vexilon stumbled, trying to swing his hammer, but Jake was too close. The weapon was useless at this range. Jake moved behind him and kicked the back of Vexilon's knee, forcing him down. When the Thorian tried to stand, Jake swept his leg and sent him crashing to the ground. The warhammer dissolved as Vexilon lost his grip. Jake immediately grabbed the Thorian's arm and twisted it into a joint lock, a technique from Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Vexilon roared in pain and tried to use his strength to break free, but Jake had leverage on his side. He applied more pressure and Vexilon had a choice: submit or have his arm broken. "Yield," Vexilon gasped. Jake released him immediately and stepped back. The computer voice announced, "Winner, Jake Morrison of Earth." The arena was silent. Completely silent. Millions of aliens sat in their seats, trying to process what they had just seen. A human, the smallest warrior in the trials, had defeated a fully armed Thorian in less than 3 minutes, using nothing but his bare hands. Then one section of the crowd started cheering. Then another. Within seconds, the entire arena was roaring with excitement. This was something new, something they had never seen before in hundreds of trials. Jake helped Vexilon to his feet. The Thorian looked at him with respect in his glowing eyes. "What kind of warrior are you?" he asked. "The humankind," Jake replied simply. As Jake walked back to the preparation chamber, he could hear the alien commentators speaking rapidly on every screen. They were pulling up information about Earth, about human history, about something called martial arts. The galaxy was learning that humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other, developing hundreds of ways to defeat opponents without weapons. In the preparation chamber, the other warriors looked at him differently now. Not with mockery, but with caution. Even Thulkar had stopped laughing. The Kragor champion stared at Jake with an expression that might have been respect, or might have been the first sign of worry. Jake sat down on a bench and took a drink of water. His body barely hurt. Vexilon had never even touched him. Around the chamber, warriors who had been so confident before were now whispering to each other, probably discussing this new threat they hadn't expected. Good, Jake thought. Let them worry. Let them wonder what else humans could do. The trials had only just begun. The second round of the trials came 3 days later. During that time, Jake became something of a celebrity in the arena complex. Everywhere he went, aliens stopped to stare at him. Some approached him with respect, others with curiosity, and a few with barely hidden fear. Jake spent most of his free time in the training areas, practicing forms and combinations that he had learned over the years. A crowd usually gathered to watch. They saw him move through kata from karate, flowing movements from tai chi, and ground fighting techniques from wrestling. To them, it looked like some kind of alien dance, beautiful and deadly at the same time. His second opponent was a Zelthian scout named Kira. The Zelthians were tall and thin, built for speed and agility. Kira had won her first fight in under a minute, using an energy bow that the arena had given her. She could shoot arrows of pure plasma faster than most species could blink. The alien commentators discussed the matchup extensively on the viewing screens. Most agreed that this would be a difficult fight for Jake. Kira could attack from a distance, and even a human's speed wouldn't be enough to close the gap before she filled him with arrows. Some suggested that Jake would finally request a weapon from the arena, maybe a shield to protect himself. But when Jake entered the arena for his second fight, he was still unarmed. Kira appeared on the opposite side, and her energy bow materialized instantly. She knocked an arrow and smiled. "I have studied your first fight, human. You are skilled at close range, but you cannot reach me if you are dead." The starting signal sounded, and Kira immediately fired 3 arrows in rapid succession. They streaked across the arena, leaving trails of light in the air. Jake was already moving. He had spotted what he needed the moment he entered the arena. A series of energy pillars that rose from the floor in a scattered pattern, probably meant to make fights more interesting by providing cover and obstacles. He dove behind one pillar as the first arrow passed where his head had been a second earlier. The crowd watched in fascination as Jake moved from pillar to pillar, using each one as cover while advancing toward Kira. She kept firing, her arrows hitting the pillars and exploding in bursts of energy. But she couldn't get a clean shot. Jake was too unpredictable, changing direction at random, never staying in one place long enough for her to aim properly. Kira started backing up, trying to maintain distance, but the arena had walls. She was running out of space. When she tried to circle around to get a better angle, Jake suddenly sprinted in a different direction than she expected, using a pillar to block her view of his movement. By the time she realized where he was going, it was too late. Jake came around the pillar at full speed, low to the ground. Kira fired one last arrow in panic, but Jake rolled under it. He came up inside her guard, grabbed the energy bow and yanked it downward while simultaneously kicking her legs out from under her. They both hit the ground, but Jake recovered first. He put Kira in an arm lock that made it impossible for her to reach for the bow. "Yield," he said firmly. "I yield," Kira gasped, and the fight was over. Jake's third fight was against a Kroll berserker named Goreth. The Kroll were famous throughout the galaxy as fearless warriors who felt no pain and fought with pure rage. Goreth carried a plasma axe that could cut through almost anything, and he was strong enough to split a starship hull with it. The fight started, and Goreth charged with a roar that shook the arena. His axe swung in massive arcs, each one powerful enough to kill Jake instantly if it connected. But Jake didn't try to block or catch the weapon like he had with others. Instead, he studied the pattern of Goreth's attacks. Berserkers were powerful, but they weren't tactical. They relied on strength and intimidation. After watching Goreth swing 3 times, Jake saw the weakness. Every attack left Goreth open on his right side for half a second while he recovered his balance. Jake waited for the right moment, then moved. He ducked under a horizontal swing and stepped into that opening, striking Goreth's ribs with a precise kick. The Kroll barely felt it and swung again. Jake dodged and hit the same spot. Again and again, Jake repeated this pattern, always moving, always striking the same location. The crowd realized what Jake was doing. He was breaking Goreth down one hit at a time. Even a Kroll's thick skin would bruise and crack under repeated impacts to the same area. Goreth started to slow down, his swings becoming more predictable as pain finally began to register. After 8 minutes of this, Jake saw his chance. He dodged inside Goreth's guard and struck the damaged ribs with all his force. Something cracked and Goreth dropped his axe, clutching his side. Jake swept Goreth's legs and put him in a chokehold. The berserker tried to fight it, but his body needed oxygen just like any other species. After a few seconds, Goreth went limp, unconscious. Between fights, Jake received a visitor in his quarters. It was Ambassador Kelthar, the alien who had first contacted Earth. The ambassador's forearms gestured in what might have been their version of a bow. "Commander Morrison, the Galactic Council is impressed with your performance. We have never seen this style of combat before. Your species fights without weapons as naturally as others breathe. Humans have been fighting for our entire history, Jake explained. We fought over food, over land, over ideas. We developed thousands of ways to hurt each other. Then we turned those ways into sports, into martial arts, into self-defense systems. We made fighting into an art form. Why did you tell the arena not to give you weapons? Kelthar asked directly. Jake smiled. You figured that out? I thought about it when you first invited us. The arena gives weapons based on instinct and training, but my instinct has always been to fight with my body first. In my military experience, weapons fail. They jam, they break, they run out of ammunition. The only thing I can always count on is myself. You are a wise warrior, Kelthar said. Your next opponent will be more challenging. Her name is Sira, a luminary philosopher warrior. She has studied your techniques and will not be easy to defeat. Jake nodded. I wouldn't want it to be easy. His fourth fight against a Minari assassin named Zeth almost ended badly. The Minari were fast, possibly the fastest species in the galaxy. Zeth had poisoned daggers and used them with incredible precision, striking at vital points with speed that made him nearly invisible. But Jake had trained with fighters who valued speed over everything else. He knew that speed without strategy was just wasted energy. Instead of trying to match Zeth's pace, Jake slowed down. He made his movements more deliberate, more efficient. Every action had a purpose. No wasted motion. Zeth kept attacking, his daggers flashing, but Jake defended with minimal movement. Block, deflect, redirect. He was using Tai Chi principles, turning Zeth's speed into a weakness. Fast attackers got tired quickly, and the Minari assassin was burning through his energy. After 5 minutes of this, Zeth started making mistakes. His attacks became sloppier, easier to predict. Jake saw an opening and took it, catching Zeth's wrist mid-strike and using a judo throw to slam him to the ground. Before Zeth could recover, Jake had disarmed him and pinned him down. The victory secured Jake's place in the semi-finals. That night, Jake sat alone in his quarters and thought about his daughter Sophie back on Earth. She would be watching these fights, seeing her father battle aliens from across the galaxy. He wondered what she thought of it all. Did she understand what was at stake? Did she know that every fight he won made humanity stronger in the eyes of the galaxy? A message came through on his communication device. It was from General Hayes on Earth. Jake, the entire planet is watching. You've made us proud. Everyone is talking about the human who fights without weapons. They're calling you a hero, but more than that, other governments are reaching out to us now. Species that ignored us before want to talk, want to trade, want to form alliances. You've changed everything for us. Whatever happens in the next fight, you've already won what matters. Jake read the message twice, then deleted it. He couldn't think about being a hero or changing the world. He could only focus on the next fight, the next opponent, the next challenge. The semifinals were tomorrow, and Sira would be waiting. Sira was different from every opponent Jake had faced. The Luminari were a species of philosophers and scholars who had reluctantly trained warriors only because the galaxy required it. They glowed with a soft internal light, their bodies seeming almost translucent. Sira's eyes held intelligence and calm that reminded Jake of the old martial arts masters he had studied under during his youth. The arena was packed even more than usual for the semi-final match. Word had spread across the galaxy about the human who fought without weapons, and species from distant star systems had traveled to watch. The betting markets were going wild. Some aliens wagered fortunes on Jake to win. Others bet against him, certain that Sira's tactical mind would find a way to defeat the human method. In the preparation chamber before the fight, Sira approached Jake. She moved with grace, her twin energy staffs already manifested and held loosely in her hands. Most warriors waited until entering the arena to summon their weapons, but Sira had called hers early. Commander Morrison, she said in perfect English. The Luminari were telepathic, so they could speak any language by reading thoughts. I have watched all your fights. I have studied human combat extensively over the past days. You are magnificent. Thank you, Jake replied. I've heard stories about Luminari warriors. You're supposed to be unbeatable in strategy. We think before we act, Sira agreed. It is our way, but I confess your species confuses me. Why do humans spend so much time learning to fight without weapons? Your technology is advanced enough to create powerful armaments. Jake considered the question. Humans have a saying, the weapon is only as good as the person holding it. We fought wars where both sides had the same guns, the same bombs, the same technology. The difference wasn't the weapons. It was training, discipline, and the will to keep fighting when everything seemed lost. So we developed systems to make our bodies into weapons that could never be taken away. A weapon that cannot be taken away, Sierra repeated thoughtfully. I understand now. This is why the arena gave you nothing. You already carry your weapons with you always. Something like that, Jake said with a small smile. Then I will face you with respect, Sierra said, bowing. And I will try my best to defeat you. When they entered the arena, the crowd fell silent in anticipation. This was the match everyone wanted to see. Strategy against instinct, philosophy against practicality, the thinking warrior versus the adaptive fighter. The starting signal sounded. Sierra didn't charge like Gorath or attack from distance like Kira. She simply stood in a defensive stance, her twin staffs held at angles that protected her entire body. Jake circled her slowly, looking for openings, but Sierra turned with him, always keeping her defense perfect. Jake tested her with a quick advance, and Sierra's staffs moved faster than his eyes could follow, creating a barrier of energy between them. He pulled back and tried a different angle. Same result. Sierra's defense was flawless. The fight continued like this for 20 minutes, then 40, then an hour. Neither fighter could find an advantage. Jake tried different approaches, techniques from various martial arts, but Sierra adapted to each one. She was learning his patterns, predicting his movements. The Luminary mind was incredibly fast, processing combat data like a computer. But Jake was learning too. He noticed that Sierra kept her staffs at specific distances from her body, creating zones of protection. He also noticed that while her defense was perfect, she rarely attacked. She was waiting for him to make a mistake. After 90 minutes, both fighters were showing signs of fatigue. Sierra's glow had dimmed slightly, and Jake's breathing was heavier. The crowd watched in amazement. Most fights in the trials lasted less than 10 minutes. This was becoming legendary. Jake decided to try something unusual. He stopped attacking and stood still, dropping his fighting stance completely. His hands hung at his sides, and he looked at Sierra with calm eyes. Sierra didn't attack. Instead, she spoke across the arena floor. Why do you stop? Because we're both too good, Jake said honestly. You've learned my patterns, and I've learned yours. We could do this for another hour and nothing would change. So I want to ask you a question. What question? Why did you summon your weapons before entering the arena? Sierra was quiet for a moment. Because I studied your fights. I saw that the arena gave you nothing because you didn't want weapons. I thought if I already had my staffs manifested before the fight began, they wouldn't be a liability. But they are, Jake said gently. Those staffs are incredible weapons and you're a master with them. But they also limit you. You can't grab or grapple with them. You can't use certain movements because you have to account for their length. And most importantly, you're fighting to protect them, not just yourself. Sierra looked at her staffs, then at Jake. You fight with empty hands not because you are weak, but because empty hands can do anything. Exactly, Jake confirmed. A fist can punch, but an open hand can grab, push, or strike with the palm. A body without weapons is free to adapt to any situation. That's what humans learned over thousands of years of fighting each other. What happened next shocked the entire arena. Sierra dismissed her energy staffs, letting them dissolve back into particles of light. She stood in front of Jake, unarmed for the first time in any fight she had ever participated in. Teach me, she said. This is still a fight, Jake reminded her. Yes, but it can be both a fight and a lesson. Show me your human method, Commander Morrison. Show me what it means to fight with empty hands. The crowd erupted in confusion and excitement. The commentators were speaking so rapidly that their translation software couldn't keep up. Nothing like this had ever happened in the combat trials. A warrior voluntarily giving up their weapons in the middle of a match. Jake assumed a new stance, more open than before. Then come. I'll show you. What followed was described by witnesses as the most beautiful fight in the history of the trials. Jake moved through techniques from a dozen different martial arts, and Sierra adapted to each one with her incredible mind. He showed her how to strike with different parts of the hand, how to use elbows and knees, how to move from standing to ground fighting seamlessly. Sierra learned fast, impossibly fast. Within minutes, she was copying his techniques and adding her own variations. Her luminary body was flexible in ways human bodies weren't, allowing her to bend and twist into positions that gave her advantages Jake had never encountered. They fought for another hour, and the arena was absolutely silent except for the sounds of the combat. It wasn't brutal or violent. It was precise, technical, almost like a dance. Each fighter pushed the other to be better, to think faster, to move more efficiently. Finally, Jake saw his opening. Sierra had committed slightly too much weight to a kick, and her balance was compromised for just a fraction of a second. He swept her standing leg and followed her to the ground, securing a pin that even her flexibility couldn't escape from. "Yield?" he asked. Sierra smiled, her glow brightening. "I yield. Thank you for the lesson, teacher." Jake helped her to her feet, and the crowd exploded in applause. Both fighters bowed to each other with deep respect. When they walked off the arena floor together, aliens from dozens of species stood and showed their own versions of respect. Some bowed, others touched their heads, and some made sounds that their species used to honor great warriors. In the preparation chamber, Sierra touched Jake's shoulder with one glowing hand. "You will fight Thulkar in the finals. He is powerful beyond measure and has never been defeated. But I believe you can win." "Why?" Jake asked. "Because you showed me that strength is not about size or weapons or even skill. It is about adapting, learning, and never being limited by what you think you need. Thulkar has always relied on his strength and his weapon. He has never had to adapt because nothing has ever challenged him enough. You will challenge him in ways he cannot imagine." Jake nodded slowly. "I hope you're right." "I am," Sierra said with certainty. "And when you win, I will be honored to help teach other species the human method. The galaxy needs to learn what you have shown me today." That night, Jake barely slept. Tomorrow, he would face the champion who had ruled the combat trials for 300 years. Everything came down to one final fight. The morning of the final match, Jake woke early and went through his usual routine: stretching, meditation, and reviewing his mental preparation. His body was sore from the previous fights, but nothing was seriously injured. He had been careful, efficient, conserving energy wherever possible. Today he would need everything he had saved. A knock came at his door. When Jake opened it, he was surprised to see Thulkar standing there. The massive Kragor warrior had to duck to fit through the doorway. Up close, he was even more intimidating than from a distance. His armor-like skin was covered in scars from 3 centuries of combat. "May I enter?" Thulkar asked, his voice surprisingly polite. "Of course," Jake said, stepping aside. Thulkar entered and looked around the small quarters. Humans live simply. This is good. Warriors should not become soft with luxury. He turned to face Jake directly. "I came to speak with you before our fight. This is not common, but you are not a common opponent." "What did you want to say?" Jake asked. "I wanted to apologize," Thulkar said, and Jake couldn't hide his surprise. "When you first arrived, I mocked you. I called you weak and said your species did not belong in the trials. I was wrong. You have fought with more honor and skill than most champions I have faced. Regardless of what happens today, you have already proven that humanity deserves respect." "Thank you," Jake said genuinely. "That means a lot coming from you." Thulkar nodded slowly. "I have held the championship for 300 years. I have defended it against the greatest warriors from dozens of species. But I will tell you honestly, human, I am not certain I will win today. You fight in ways I have never encountered. You turn weakness into strength and make your opponent's advantages into their downfall. It is remarkable." "Your people value strength," Jake observed. "But you also value honor. I've seen that in how the Kragor interact with other species. You respect worthy opponents." "We do," Thulkar agreed. "And you are worthy. When we fight today, I will not hold back. To do so would be an insult to you. I will come at you with all my power, all my skill, all my experience. And if you defeat me, I will be the first to acknowledge your victory." "Same here," Jake promised. "I'll give you my best fight." Thulkar extended one massive hand and Jake shook it. The size difference was almost comical, Jake's hand disappearing in the Kragor's grip. But there was respect in that handshake, warrior to warrior. When Thulkar left, Jake sat quietly for a while thinking. He had come to Karis Prime expecting to face monsters, aliens who only cared about violence and domination. Instead, he had found warriors with honor, philosophers with wisdom, and competitors who valued skill over everything. The galaxy was more complex than Earth had imagined. The arena was beyond capacity for the final match. Aliens filled every seat, every standing space. every viewing area. Billions more watched from across the galaxy through holographic broadcasts. The betting markets had reached unprecedented levels. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a statement about humanity's place in the galactic community. In the preparation chamber, Jake could see other warriors who had been eliminated. They had all stayed to watch the final. Vexilon was there, the Thorian from his first fight. Kira, the Zelthian scout. Gorath, the Kroll berserker. Even Sira stood near the entrance to the arena, her glow bright with anticipation. The announcement came. The final match of the combat trials will now begin. Thulkar, champion of the Kragor, holder of 3 consecutive championships, enter the arena. Thulkar walked through the tunnel to thunderous applause. When he stepped onto the arena floor, his weapon materialized instantly. It was an energy, Maul, a massive hammer that glowed with orange and red power. The weapon was nearly as large as Jake's entire body, and Thulkar lifted it with one hand like it weighed nothing. Jake Morrison, champion candidate of Earth, entered the arena. Jake walked through his tunnel, and the crowd's roar was deafening. In just a few days, he had become a favorite among many species. The human who fought without weapons had captured their imagination. As expected, nothing materialized when Jake entered. He stood in the center of the arena floor, empty-handed, facing an opponent 3 times his size who carried a weapon that could shatter stone. The starting signal sounded. Thulkar didn't charge immediately. Instead, he approached slowly, carefully, his maul held ready. He had learned from watching Jake's other fights. He knew that rushing in was exactly what the human wanted. Jake circled, watching for patterns, looking for any weakness. But Thulkar's defense was solid. He kept his maul between himself and Jake, using it to control the space. When Jake tried to move in close, Thulkar would swing, forcing Jake to retreat. It was simple but effective. They circled each other, for 5 minutes testing, probing, neither finding an opening. The crowd watched in tense silence. This was chess played at combat speed. Jake noticed something. Every time Thulkar swung his maul, there was a brief moment where the weapon's weight pulled him slightly off balance. It was tiny, maybe 1/10 of a second, but it was there. The problem was that Jake couldn't get close enough to exploit it without getting hit. 20 minutes passed. Jake tried different approaches, but Thulkar had studied him well. The Kragor warrior had learned patience over 3 centuries, and he wasn't making mistakes. Jake was starting to feel the wear from his previous fights. His legs were getting tired, his reactions slightly slower. Thulkar saw it too. "You are tiring, human. This is what happens when you rely only on your body. Weapons do not tire." "Maybe," Jake admitted. "But weapons can't think." He tried something risky. Instead of dodging when Thulkar swung, Jake moved toward the swing at an angle. The maul hit his shoulder, a glancing blow that still hurt terribly and would definitely leave a bruise. But Jake used that moment of contact to grab the weapon's shaft. Thulkar tried to pull the maul away, but Jake held on with both hands, using all his strength and body weight. He wasn't trying to take the weapon. He was using it as an anchor, point to pull himself in close, right up against Thulkar's body where the huge Kragor couldn't generate any force with his swings. And then Jake did what humans had evolved to do best. He fought dirty and efficiently in close quarters. Elbow strikes to gaps in Thulkar's armor, knee strikes to the lower body, short punches to vulnerable joints. None of the hits were powerful, enough to seriously hurt the massive warrior, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to distract and disorient. Thulkar dropped his maul and tried to grab Jake, to use his size advantage to throw the human off. But Jake had trained in wrestling since he was a child. He knew how to control someone bigger than himself, how to use leverage and positioning to neutralize strength. They went to the ground, both fighters struggling for advantage. The crowd was screaming now, completely absorbed in the fight. Thulkar was incredibly strong, but Jake was relentless. Every time Thulkar tried to establish a hold, Jake would slip out and transition to a new position. Finally, Jake saw his opportunity. Thulkar's neck, despite the thick armor-like skin, still needed blood flow to his brain like any other species. Jake maneuvered behind the Kragor warrior and locked in a rear naked choke, a technique that had ended fights for hundreds of years in human martial arts. Thulkar struggled, his strength terrifying. He tried to slam Jake against the arena floor, but Jake held on, keeping his hooks in, maintaining the choke. Seconds passed. The crowd was on their feet. Even with Thulkar's thick neck, even with his incredible endurance, biology was biology. The blood flow to his brain was cut off. Thulkar's hand came up. He tapped Jake's arm 3 times, the universal sign of submission. Jake released immediately and rolled away, gasping for breath. His shoulder throbbed where the maul had hit him. His body was covered in sweat and bruises, but he had won. Winner of the combat trials, Jake Morrison of Earth. The arena exploded in sound. Aliens from dozens of species were cheering, roaring, making whatever sounds their biology allowed to express excitement. Jake got to his feet slowly, every muscle aching. Thulkar was already standing. The massive Kregor warrior looked at Jake with something that might have been a smile. 300 years I held that title, and I am not sad to lose it to you, human. You fought with honor, skill, and a heart that would not quit. You are a worthy champion. He extended his hand, and Jake shook it again. Then Thulkar raised Jake's arm high, showing the crowd their new champion. The next hour was a blur. Jake was brought to the center of the arena where Ambassador Kelthar presented him with the championship mark, a holographic symbol that would identify him as the trial's victor. Representatives from dozens of species approached to offer congratulations and discuss potential alliances with Earth. But the moment that mattered most to Jake came when he saw the viewing screen showing Earth. The entire planet had watched the fight. Cities were celebrating. People were crying with joy. His daughter Sophie was on the screen, being interviewed by news media talking about how proud she was of her dad. In his victory speech, Jake kept it simple. I came here representing humanity, not knowing what to expect. I found warriors with honor, philosophers with wisdom, and opponents who made me better with every fight. The galaxy has a lot to teach Earth, and maybe we have some.